It's also that, what I think is one of the more interesting aspects of the theme of corruption in this movie is that, there's a couple aspects. One of which is that Cross and Mulray owned the water supply prior to making it a public utility, which Mulray wanted to do. And the
Yeah.
idea was is that this was we're supposed to believe this was a philanthropic act, that people shouldn't privately own the water supply in Southern California. And yet, at the end of the day, even the public institution ends up being corrupted by literally the same man who used to own it, right? He can still pull the strings. So what is disguised as something owned by the people for the public good is really just a tool of the same rich people that originally owned it in the first place. It's the aristocracy never goes away, even in the democratic, allegedly democratic society of America, which I think is hugely influential. And the other thing too is that the good men in this movie are marginalized or killed, and even suspected first, right? I think that's what's so interesting about Mulray, the character, is we really don't see much of him. At the start of the movie, we see Jack Nicholson go to a speech or a city council meeting where he's saying he's not going to build the dam because it's dangerous. So fuck you guys, basically fuck the private interests.
I won't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's seen as an upstanding person with moral character, but at the same time, the opening of this movie is him being suspected of infidelity and a private eye following him around and trying to figure out what he's up to and shadowing him as he is doing his own investigation of what is happening to this water, right? And so he is made to seem like the villain, which we later understand is completely untrue. And in fact, he rescued the woman who became his wife from his corrupt business partner. We don't really understand the relationship with
mistake twice.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. He saved this kind of forlorn girl that we know now, similar relationship to his wife initially. That's the thing. Like, there's loads of foreshadowing in this movie.
And here's there's so much ambiguity. So we also, because he's going to meet Catherine, which is his wife's daughter / his sister-in-law, whatever you want to call it. We assume that's because he's trying to help her in some way, right? Or take care of her in some way. As we find out later on, that's probably his most likely motive. Even Mrs. Mulray herself says repeatedly, he was basically says he was a very good man, right? And also the implication through this movie too is that they might not even have a sexual relationship, because remember that he allowed her to flee to Mexico when she was still a young teenager to take care of her, and it's implied that they are both having affairs outside of the marriage, but it's never really implied that they had sex. So it's almost as though you could assume potentially that he married her when she got older in order to take care of her, not because there was a legitimate romantic relationship between the two of them. And so in a way, Mulray, we don't ever actually get to see a conversation with him really, but he is a good man who should be in a position of power, who comes from immense wealth, who gave basically the thing he owned to the city of Los Angeles for the public good. And even he is like, he can be the best man possible in a position of power, and even he is helpless against the corruption, right?
Yeah,
I
actually
think.
Oh, go on.
Ridiculed. I was going to say I'm publicly ridiculed. I mean, right from the very first scene,
right?
This
Even though
guy
he wasn't he was in the newspaper falsely accused of having an affair.
Yeah, he's literally there saying, "Guys, the last time we built a dam like this, I was conned into believing this scientific data. The silt won't hold the dam."
And it killed 500 people.
It killed 500 people, and I have to live with that. And then that dude brings in his flock of sheep. Fucking love that scene. He just brings in his sheep and going, "What are we going to do about them? What are we going to do about them sheep, sir?" And again, as he's like packing up his papers and has to walk away. It's like, this is a good man who is, through the lens Jake Gittes sees the world, can't possibly be as good as he is. And that's how he ends up being disgraced and eventually winds up dead. Jake Gittes certainly plays his part in that. And then essentially tries to atone for it, but it's too late. Good people can't exist in the world of Chinatown.
I don't know if people really realise, because the movie takes on such a roller coaster, and by the end you can barely remember where it began. Since the movie begins, remember the actual starting conceit essentially is Jake Gittes is actually helping the fucking evil people. He's been sold a false bill of goods that he's like investigating, like infidelity. He's actually inadvertently setting up this good man we're talking about. Like immediately there's that element. Then think about when the Faye Dunaway character arrives, right? She immediately does like a lawsuit or something against him, right? And then because of this storyline, like you're saying, Monty, where when he confronts her, like, but you've been out, that implies you've had affairs. That also then makes you think, right, she is the femme fatale. She's just some cynical bitch who's with this guy for whatever money, power. Then later, when you find her with that woman who turns out is her daughter, you assume, right, she's actually now kidnapped the woman he's dating, and she's keeping like, essentially they do a really good job of, like I've mentioned on past episodes, they don't violate the Raymond Chandler rule, which is you never lie to the audience. You never show them something fake that was a dream that you don't tell them till later and give. No, what you do here is we just, because we're in Jake's position, like Monty says, like the POV, we're just getting the same info, but because of the order and the timing of the info, it's making us draw the wrong conclusions. We're thinking she's this person, whereas actually, as you say, Monty, at the end, she was just a victim all along. Actually, she wasn't doing almost anything evil.
And even Noah Cross, John Huston's character, is trying to convince Jake that that Mrs. Mulray is a danger to Catherine, that she is unhinged, and because Mulray was, quote, cheating on her, unquote, with this other woman. Yep. And so he tries to pay Jake to go and find this girl, which we later know has been the granddaughter that has been hidden from him in a different house within town. She had been intentionally held from him to prevent his abuse, basically.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.